Today is the fourth talk of the August 86 retreat. At first, an announcement. It is requested that during all meeting times, which is almost all the time, except the period after the talk until lunch, the period after the exercise period to supper, and the round before the talk, that during all other times people not use this room, this door here, leading from this room to the balcony in order to get to the kitchen area, or bathroom or bedroom area. Not to exit through this door here, but during the walking to exit from the dining room door. Likewise, when joining the walking, or after a period of walking, coming back in for a sit, to use the dining room door, not using the balcony door. Because there are people who are sitting in the balcony or sitting down in the solarium, and the back and forth of the walking, the inevitable sounds of the doors, is a disturbance. Actually, people are sitting in the balcony during those periods that I've just mentioned. So let's not use this door at all.
Except to go to meals.
Huh?
Except to go to meals.
Except to go to meals, yes. So forget about these periods when there's not meetings, because people may still be sitting there in a more comfortable or supportive, back supportive chair. So just not to use this except to go to meals. Yesterday we talked about work, and someone brought to my attention that I hadn't said anything about when one works for a deadline, which we seem to be doing so much of the time, having to get some work done by a certain time. And does that pressure of the deadline necessarily have to affect the way we work, the attentiveness of working? Of course not. It may, or it does, but it doesn't have to. Having to work within a given amount of time means one has to work faster to get something done. What comes to mind is preparations for retreat in the kitchen or in the house, keeping certain soups, breads, instructions given, dishes put out, innumerable things have to get done. And they can't be done later. Does it mean that if one is working at a fast speed, one cannot be attentive to what one is doing? Obviously. Attention does not depend on speed. That it's only possible to be attentive if one does something slowly, and immediately becomes inattentive when one does something quickly. When we were in the California retreat, there were people from so many different training backgrounds, and some people walked very, very slowly. One wouldn't call it walking anymore. It was just almost standing still while moving a foot and then another foot. These are awareness practices, and maybe for the first time one becomes aware of something as one does this. But as with everything, one can become used to it, and the mind, when it's used to something, takes off. And walking briskly or moderately fast does not mean there's no attention. And yet, a fast-moving clip, people working fast, the activity of it is noticeable, is audible, it's feelable. And that may remind one, through association of other pressurized situations in which one has worked, and the whole situation then becomes one of speeding. It doesn't have to, but it may be through reminder, what it reminds one of. And the people themselves who are working around one may be speeding. And it may be infectious, one starts speeding too. And the anxiety that is in trying to get something done may also be associated from past situations where one was punished or scolded when one didn't get something in on time. A bad mark, the term paper came late or no mark, failure. So working fast is fraught with associations of anxiety. Will I get it done? Can I do it? And the fear of failure. And it may not be in the present situation at all, but it's associated. It reminds one of past situations in which deadlines meant either acceptance or reward or failure. So, whatever situation one finds oneself in, can one stop for a moment and sort out whether this is what it reminds one of? Of course, one may not be aware of this, and that's the difficulty. But it's possible to become aware of it, of association in the mind. It happens fast, but it is not totally imperceptible when there is this awareness that wonders, what am I doing? How am I working? What is going on? Why am I doing this? Do I have to do it this way? And I don't mean rebellious thoughts, but open-ended questions, and therefore the attending in the questioning, in not taking anything for granted, no response that comes for granted. One way that we take things for granted, we express it this way: well, this is just my habit. This is just a habit. It's just my conditioning. It's such a useless way of commenting on what one is doing. It doesn't open up anything. And one doesn't have to look at it because one has already explained it. It's an old habit or an old conditioning. But to wonder, why am I doing it? And then to look, not to seek for answers to this question in the past through remembrance, but to let the remembrance emerge because the question has been asked. It's all in the present. The past is in the present, in the way we work, in the way we feel, in the way we emote. This is the totality of our present right here, in the present action, in the present talking, in the present responding. So, is it possible to be attentive in a speedy situation which has a deadline? Not carried away by the associations, by the atmosphere, the vibes. It's very difficult, but it's not impossible. Metaphor has come to mind in a few meetings of driving in heavy traffic all over, and one's own car in the midst of it, and coming to a red light, and just hearing the sound of one's own motor and all the other motors idling. I don't know why we use the word idling. It's not idle, it's particularly if one has a problem with one's idle. Some cars are so beautiful, you almost don't hear the idle. That's an idle. But to listen to it, not to the content of one's thoughts, but to this whole process. To this common process of our motors running. Sort of with an overall view which is not entangled in one's personal situation. One person said something like this: I followed what you were saying in the talk to some extent, and I got an inkling of what it is that needs to be done. But it seems absolutely impossible to me to do this. I think one can share that feeling, that observation. It seems absolutely impossible for me to do that. I'm looking a bit further, asking what specifically was meant, was thought about. The response was, all I know is thinking. I don't know anything else. I was wondering whether this morning, right now during this talk, we can test whether all there is to this mind and body, and not separate from each other, is thinking. And thinking about thinking. Reflecting upon one's thoughts. Reacting to one's thoughts, judging one's thoughts, wanting different thoughts, wanting no thoughts, all of it thinking. Yesterday we said all of this thinking in a narrow box, which is this me, with its wants and fears and hopes and past background and conditioning and aspirations and pleasures and pains. What is thinking? And what is listening? And is listening thinking? Is seeing something thinking? We can go through that right now, starting with listening right now. Can one just listen? And is that listening and what is heard thought? Listen. Listen again, is that thought? The thought is probably right there, isn't it? Trees, moving, leaves touching each other, branches swaying in the breeze. These words are there and maybe a picture in the mind. The picture in the mind of a tree swaying, the change of silvery to dark green of the leaves, that picture is no different from the thought, in essence, tree, from the idea or the name or the word thought, tree. It's all computer output coming from memory. We all know the word tree. We all have seen a tree and have remembered it. There's a trace, a memory recording in the bank of this computer. Can one distinguish clearly between the listening and maybe the instant of a sound that has not yet been named, that is not yet known? Listen. Can there just be that? Or is there immediately the word airplane? And does one see, realize that the word airplane is not that Can one listen without the word, without the memory, the image? Does one see the difference between perception of what is actually there and the naming of it, the symbol? And does one realize that the word airplane or the word tree or the word wind is not what is actually going on? Can one listen again and again? without the word, seeing the word come up, realizing word is not the real thing. A word is a word. And as such, it is also a process which is observable. One can see that word come up. An internal screen, one can see the picture. Right now, you can picture trees swaying, can't you? Like on an invisible internal screen. The picture itself, or the word appearing on the computer screen of the brain, is real as a picture, as a thought, a word. That's real. It's some kind of not yet explained process. And the explanation of the process would not be this picture right now of trees swaying, the change of color and the movement, the shaking of the leaves. That picture is real, the explanation of what happens electrochemically, whatever. That explanation is not the picture one gets. And the picture is not the actuality of the trees swaying. If we give an explanation of how this happens, that the brain is capable of producing a picture that is visible, that explanation itself is an electrochemical process in the brain based on knowledge, experimentation, theory, speculation. But that explanation, even though it's real as it is occurring as an explanation, it's a real occurrence in the brain when it happens, when we explain something. And it's perceptible. An explanation going on in the brain is perceptible. But the explanation is not what it is explaining. Do you see that? And the word airplane, even though the word has its own reality as far as the brain functioning is concerned, but the word airplane is not where is it now? We could go through the same thing visually. Everybody can see this floor. Maybe the mat is closer to the eyes. The word mat is not this here. This is just this. And going around the edges, the feel of the straight seam, or almost straight seam. That's not the word, seam. The feel of it is not the word. The color, the word brown, is not this. Actually, if one looks at it, and doesn't think of a word to describe the color, it would be very hard to say what color it is. It's just this. Staying with the mat at the moment, usually it doesn't, in our process of naming. It doesn't stay there. We start reacting. We see something and we react to it. There's a response in terms of, I like this or I don't like it. I want this or I don't want it. It is pretty or it's ugly. At that moment of responding to what we see, taking the mat, at the moment of responding, this is an ugly color, how did they ever hit upon such an ugly color? One doesn't see this anymore. One is now with the internal screen, with one's thoughts and reactions. They're what occupies the brain, and this fades, is not seen anymore. And whether one likes this color or not is dependent on what the color is associated with in the mind. If one has been to a place, worked at a place where this color mat was used, and one has pleasant memories of this, there will be a pleasant association. If one has unpleasant memories, there will be a reaction of dislike or a disagreeable response, depending on one's background. The past memories laid down determine our present response to something. If the past memory was one of pleasure, good feeling, this is why we may like a color now and feel good with it. If the past memories were unpleasant, painful, that determines our response now to this color or to the mat or to the whole room. And as our past memories, our past experiences determine our present response to what we see, we don't see. We are occupied, we're in the grip of past experiences and the response coming out of that. We've used the example of a mat, but I think we have used in other talks the example of meeting people, the memory of past experiences with this person, either wanting us to be with this person in terms of how he or she were in the past, or avoid this person in terms of what he or she did to us in the past. We can't see the person. We only see our memories and are compelled by the responses which come out of those memories. Unless we stop at the red light and listen to the motor idling, questioning the whole thing, not taking anything for anything, for habit or this or that conditioning, but looking what's happening. If you say, I can't do that, it's impossible. All I see is what this person reminds me of. Already, as I know I'm going to see this person, already before I see him or her, I already have that memory. Can you see that this is happening? And is that seeing thought? Or is it an actual perception of a memory image? If you think right now of your closest friend at home, or wherever he or she may be, there's clearly a memory image, isn't there, on this internal screen. And is it of past pleasures or pains one has experienced with this person? Does one see the person smiling or angry, giving one a hard time or opening the arms to embrace one? If the pictures of the person opening the arms to embrace one, this is how we want to meet him again, or her. And the mind is already programmed, set, expecting. And if there's an angry look at the face or a sad one, do we see that? Are we immediately disappointed because what is actually there does not come up to expectation according to the image? Can one look at anything, inanimate or animate, as though one had never seen it before? Meaning the activity of projecting past memory images is either quiet or is immediately detected for what it is. And it is understood that the image is not what I'm looking at. It's there, it may be there, it's so quick. But does one see that they are two entirely different things? What's there and the seeing of it, and what's there as a memory, and the looking at the memory as memory, not being compelled by it. In thinking of oneself, the immediately idea of what one is, what one should be, would like to be, has been, will be. All of these are images or ideas. One may not be a visually inclined person, one may be more ideational, but whether one projects on the screen an idea or an image, it's the same thing. Who is one? From moment to moment, other than images. Mental memory images. And if these images are frustrated by someone who doesn't treat them right, there's anger. If they're flattered, there's a surge of good feelings. If there's attack, there's defense. We almost constantly live in a defensive posture, defending images of ourselves. And can one begin to see that these images are what they are? Something coming out of memory. Granted that memory can project the future, but it's still memory projecting an image for the future or an idea of what one will be. Neither of this having anything to do with what one is right now. What is one right now? What is the sound? What is this here? When one understands that it's not the word, it's not the picture, it's not the idea, then what is it? The word cicadas or insects humming is not this. People will say it's so brief. A moment of direct perception is so brief, and then there's the Niagara of thoughts drowning the actual perception. Can one see that? That it is happening? And not immediately have an idea of what should be happening, namely that this perception should last. That's also thought. To be aware of thoughts rushing in. What a discovery. That's a direct perception. But if one thinks this shouldn't happen, then there's no perception, there's only a reaction to thoughts. Thoughts rushing in a reaction without actually seeing what's going on, without judgment. We're so compelled to judge everything as right and wrong. Can one see that? That compulsion, and catch it as it happens. That's awareness. If I think it shouldn't happen, that's thought. To all of us, there are instances of pure perception. It's so speedy that thought takes over. But sometimes there's a gap. There's really a moment of direct perception with no thought of me even perceiving. Just what's there, and it's astonishing when it happens. Because for the first time, and it's always a first time when this happens, there's just what is, without any distortion or hazing over or reacting or opposing. And then thought again. Will it last? Why has it gone? Will I get it back? Oh boy, now I've got it. Becoming somebody because of that, because one has read and heard about such a thing, and now one may feel to be of the inner circle. That's thought. And at that moment, there's no pure perception. Or can one perceive that thought immediately as it arises, so it doesn't grow vines and roots all over the mind? coming back to the statement of someone that it seems so utterly impossible to do what needs to be done. That's thought itself, isn't it? To think this is impossible, that's thought. And with that thought come mental, physical feelings of incapacity, helplessness, powerlessness. The body has an accompaniment for every thought. A different accompaniment for every thought. Some accompaniment is pleasant. Body feels good and energized, relaxed, or pain, tension, knots, stress to a fearful thought. Fearful thought, I will never be able to do this, and there's feeling in the unpleasant feeling in the stomach or a headache, particularly if one wants to do it, which is also thought. I have to do it, I should do it to put my life together, I should have more awareness. That's not awareness, is it? That's thought, with its physical accompaniment of tension. When there is attention, awareness, listening, can one just let it be? Without wanting to get something out of it. Without wanting to make it last, without wanting. And if wanting comes up, can it be seen instantly? That's thought and physical accompaniment. And if that's seen, can one leave it at that, or does the thought come up, I shouldn't be wanting? That's thought again with physical accompaniment. And the knot thickens. And then the thought, I don't want these knots. I should take a remedy. Go to some kind of doctor or therapy to loosen this knot. And then one takes this knot to the doctor or the therapist. Can one observe how it comes into being, how it is created? If that escapes one, even if the doctor will dissolve this knot, we'll put a next one, put another one there. Next one, the same process happens unawares. Wanting something, and then not wanting, and then not wanting, not wanting. Can one get a feeling for how we put ourselves under stress, how we create our own dis-ease through this process of thinking and reacting? how the symptoms crop up, and then the symptoms with the disease with the symptoms, the discomfort, the conflict with them, which creates more symptoms. The body reacts to every thought. Only when it's left alone with no further input of get rid of this, don't like that, keep that. If it's left alone, can these knots unravel. Alone in awareness. Which doesn't want anything, doesn't want to unravel and unravel the knots either. It has no want. It's just seeing what's there, feeling, listening to what's there in its fullness. So when thought comes up again saying this is impossible to do, we mentioned earlier that maybe we've got this place here to look at not what is possible to do, meaning perpetuating our patterns and habits, but what's impossible. Then we don't know how to go about it. Maybe that's a good state of the mind. Not to know how to go about doing the impossible. The mind really realizes that. What can it do? Anything it wants to do for or against is more of the same. Thought, reaction, and the reaction to the reaction. Can the mind quiet down? In this realization that whatever it does is more of the same. And not knowing how to do what seems impossible. And not go to sleep, but awake and alert to what's actually happening, not on this internal screen, yeah, aware of that too, aware of everything, without any differentiation inside, outside, good or bad. We will end here for today.